let's go ahead with the next talk. The next talk, which is how to become one of them. Deep cover operations in cyber criminal communities. Now to cover this talk, we have some amazing people over here. One is Sean Thomas Jones, as you can see, is a DEFCON goon. He is an accomplished senior information security professional with decades of experience in successfully stopping hackers, securing networks, and applications by using best practices and tools and technologies. On the other hand, we've also got Robert, who is a threat intelligence analyst, someone who works on ransomware negotiations and human intelligence. So they're going to come across a tool called as HUMINT, which is one of the most powerful yet least understood tools in cyber threat intelligence. And this talk will cover a thorough, full life cycle of a deep cover HUMINT operation. So please give it up for our speakers.
Thank you. And yes, my name is Sean Jones. How's this? This better? Yes, no? Higher? All right, sorry about that. Currently a senior manager at GroupSense. I spent years breaking things, building things, stumbling on three-letter agency honeypots while trying to keep people safe and collecting cool stories.
This is a funny contraption. Can you all hear me? Perfect. Okay. So I'm Robert Rocio. My career, I began in U.S. Special Operations. Forward to the present, I do intel collection and analysis. I'm a threat intelligence analyst with GroupSense. And I'm really privileged to put my skills to use protecting people. So anyways, without further ado, Sean, I'll let you go ahead.
All right, today, this trade craft is going to be behind the reports. It's the ghost work that we do, the kind of intel that automation cannot reach, so we're going to dive right in. I want to walk through what we're covering today and what you can expect from this session. First, we're going to talk about why HUMINT still matters in cyber threat intelligence, especially in the era of AI, automation, and massive OSINT tooling. The short answer, those tools do not get you into private groups or earn you trust. Then we'll break down the full life cycle of deep cover operations, from choosing the right forum, building your persona, staying operationally secure, and eventually engaging with threat actors directly to extract high value intelligence. We'll show you real world examples of how threat actors reveal more than they mean to, and how we identify victims, vulnerabilities, motivations before anything ever hits the public feeds. We'll also address the challenges and risk involved and wrap up the conversation about the ethics of this work. Because let's be honest, it's a gray area and it needs structure.
So, when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, a lot of times the first thing that we think about is going to be the technical side of things. We talk about it, we think about scrapers, we think about artificial intelligence, we think about the way that we go and we look for technical indicators. All of these things. The problem though is that they are incomplete. If you've ever worked in the in the intelligence community at large, even outside of cyber threat intelligence, you know that human intelligence has always been considered one of the highest and probably the highest impact intelligence collection method there is. Everything at the base level is humans, right? Threat actors are humans. These are real people in the real world who are doing things, and they're secretive people. And oftentimes the only way to figure out what it is that they're doing and who they're doing it to is going to be to go and actually talk to them and to the people around them. So that's where we come at it with cyber threat or with human intelligence. What we can do with it is we can close the gaps. A lot of times in our automated tool sets and our scrapers, We just don't pull up things, and we need to fill in what's in between, what those don't bring in. We talk about closed source threats. A lot of these are very small communities. They're very insular communities. And if you can get yourself inside of those networks, then you can find where the threats are going to be, and you can stop the attacks before that they happen. So we can go behind the indicators, we can go to intent, we can figure out what they're going to do even before they're actually doing it. And this is something that you just cannot get with more technical methods of collection. So when we're talking about the methodology behind human intelligence, and if any of you, like I said, have experience in human intelligence, you will know that it kind of runs the gamut. You might be talking about traditional human intelligence where you're recruiting sources, recruiting agents, and they are passing information to you surreptitiously, not realizing who you are. Or you could be doing more deep cover type work where you are embedded in there and you're collecting it that way. Either way, as long as it's coming from a human, it's human intelligence. Coming back to that, we can see here's a picture of what it might look like if you're going onto one of these darknet networks and searching for basically initial access brokers, IABs, who are selling accesses that they've developed. A lot of the customers for these accesses are, of course, going to be threat actors who are going to do something with it, like ransomware, syndicates. But when you see a posting like this, of course, the seller has a vested interest in giving you as little information as possible before they get the money in their hands, right? So what we can do is we can use our human intelligence skills to kind of go in there and to start to suss out what the information is behind this offering. And if possible, we can get that information to the victim before it's too late. So if you see, this is basically what a typical listing might look like. What we're going to do after this is we're going to reach out to the seller, because we've already developed personas, and we will get into how we do that here in a bit. But we're going to reach out to them. Sometimes that's going to be a methodology where we are letting them sell it to us. Well, what is it really? Okay, what do you actually have? Can you give me a little bit more to show that this is worth my money? Because remember, they're trying to sell something to you. So you can put it back on them to try and convince you to give them your money. And you want to get as much information about it as possible. Oftentimes that's going to involve taking this conversation off the forum to something like a Talks or to to Telegram, any number of different other sources to do that. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to Sean to talk about this next part.
All right, now this is one of the cool things about embedded access advantage. And our first top screenshot is pre-market access. Our good friend Intel Broker, he was famous for doing pre-advertising in the chat of the I forgot what the forum was. I apologize.
I think this
and breach forums. Yes. And he would a lot of times will tell people who are watching things he's about to sell or he's about to put up for sale. Also, our second example is when the threat actor will give us information privately about an access that he may have. This example was one for a database for a large company that they were offering to us so we can possibly purchase it. Some of the key things to remember is HUMINT, it delivers pre-public high confidence threat intelligence. The direct engagement allows threat validation, and context gathering. Additionally, a human presence enables a deeper understanding of intent and targeting. HUMINT is critical where automation and scraping fail or fall short. Now, I want to discuss some of the challenges of HUMINT. The first challenge that we have and risk that we have would consist of operational, technical, and even emotional challenges associated with HUMINT work in cybersecurity forums. While the intelligence payoff can be huge, the risks are equally as significant. Legal and ethical boundaries must be considered. Operating undercover in criminal forums often enters legal gray zones. Different jurisdictions interpret engagement, impersonations, or passive observations in various ways. The organization must define clear internal policies and escalation paths to ensure compliance and accountability. The analyst must understand what's allowed, such as reading versus participating, or facilitating versus observing. There are also risks of detection and exposure. The threat actor's activity must be monitored. The threat actors monitor for suspicious behavior, new accounts, or inconsistencies. For instance, a sudden changer in your posting behavior, such as you're posting less frequent to more frequent, or you're changing languages, or even you start posting during different time zones. This will put you at risk, and the threat actor may deem those actions suspicious, and they may kick you out the forum. Additionally, again, this detection could lead to the exposure of your persona. If there's an OPSEC failure, they will attempt to dox you, or you could be blacklisted from key communities. Additionally, doing these things are time intensive. You don't rush through this. It takes a long time to build credibility, especially in the more closed communities. They may require weeks or months in low-level engagement. Unlike OSINT tools, again, it cannot be rushed. It takes time to establish trust in these underground communities. Sometimes forums go dark. It may require new invites. The platform may shift. These things tend to affect your long-term operations. Additionally, you must maintain your operational consistency. Every detail of your persona must be maintained with precision. You got to stick to your time zone, stick to the languages, stick to your background story. All this is important. Additionally, switching between multiple personas, this may cause mistakes, and that would cause that particular community to become suspicious of your activities. There is also a psychological and emotional toll. Daily exposure to toxic, aggressive, or violent content can affect the analyst's mental well-being. Additionally, maintaining a deceptive identity and engaging with threat actors in this way may lead to moral fatigue or stress. One of the things that we need to remember about the intelligence that we gather from these threat actors, it must always be verified. Many times these threat actors, they'll exaggerate, they'll lie, because they're just trying to make the sale, trying to make $1, and they'll do pretty much anything to do that. Sometimes it's often challenging to determine the credibility of the shared information without external validation. I remember one time we were dealing with an entity, and they were concerned about access to critical controlled environments that were being sold by one of these threat actors. We were able to make contact with that threat actor, and they passed us all the information that they said that they had. We validated that information and found out that they just took this from a public site of our customers. So they lied about it. HUMINT is unmatched in the insights that you can gather. But it does come with a high operational and ethical complexities. Success requires careful planning, long-term investment, and experienced analysts. Organizations must weigh the risk and reward and build strong governments around these operations.
All right. So next thing I want to talk about is how we select human sources. Now, in the intelligence community, you might have heard the terms access and placement before. This is a really important concept when we're evaluating a human source, because the first thing that we want to know is where is this person sitting and what do they have access to? What can they do for us, really? And that's what it all comes down to when it's about source selection. Because there's a lot of people out there on the dark web who can tell you a lot of things, and only a very small percentage of them are going to tell you the things that you're interested in. Whenever you're looking at a human source, you're always going to want to be thinking not just in terms of what they know, but in who they know. Because human sources always can lead to new human sources, and they might be as a segue into new networks that can be of use. So when you talk about criteria for prioritization of these sources, one of the first things that we're going to be looking at is on the forums where they're active, what is their reputation? Reputation is the currency that kind of runs the darknet oftentimes. And so as you're going through, you're going to talk about, you're going to see what their reputation is, you're going to see who they're talking to on those forums, you're going to figure out just what they know, you're going to figure out what they sell, and as you kind of get an idea for who they sell to and what they know, you're going to start to suss out that this might be somebody who could be useful to you as a human source for further development. There's also an aspect of risk and risk analysis that comes with this. Higher level sources have a tendency to be a little bit riskier. As a general rule, the better the information is, the more risky it is to get it. You can always think of it that way when you're thinking about risk scoring, but you want to talk about it in a way that makes sure that what you're going to get is worth the payout in terms of the risk. The other thing that we'll talk about when we talk about source selection and access and placement is to make sure that it's always matching your needs. Intel collection is nothing if it doesn't actually serve our priority intelligence requirements. Whenever we're beginning a human operation, we need to be asking the questions, right? What do I need to get, and what information is important for me to know? And to make sure that everything that you do serves the purpose of moving towards that. So let's get into some of the kind of the nuts and bolts of how this actually works. When we're approaching a human source, the first thing you need to do is to craft what we call a persona. Now, a persona is distinct from a cover in the sense that this is an online personality who's a completely artificial construct and has no presence in the physical world aside from you, right? So Besides that, though, the fundamentals of building a persona and building a cover are the same. You always want to make sure that it's grounded in something that's in a plausible backstory. So you want to think, this person that I'm trying to impersonate, or that I want this other person to believe that I am, who would that person be? What is their background? Where do they come from? All of these are questions that you need to ask yourself at the beginning and to make sure you're consistent with. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you are building a backstory that just completely doesn't match who you're trying to be, right? And what the other problem is that if you tell all of these different lies, then at some point they might actually have to be true. If you say that you're from Salt City, California, then you might just run into somebody who's going to ask you about Salt City, right? So you've always got to know these things so that you can be consistent in the way that you're presenting yourself to the person that you're trying to talk to and trying to recruit to get information from. The other thing that you need to make sure is that your persona has the supporting infrastructure behind it. We call this backstopping a lot of times. You might have heard the term before. To make sure that you have all of the support structures behind the persona to make it plausible when it becomes important, right? In a cyber context, you might think of this as if you're trying to pass yourself off as an experienced hacker, as an experienced access broker or something of the sort, then you better know how to do those things and how the process works, right? You can't be asking the source to explain things to you that you probably should know based upon what you've already represented to them. And so that's all part of setting the background infrastructure. In terms of like the nuts and bolts of this, what you always want to start with is the basic level indicators. So you're going to create your accounts. You're going to create accounts for a particular persona. We always get married to our aliases, right? So you're going to come up with that alias and you're going to make accounts for that across multiple forums. Because whenever you're talking to somebody new, they're going to want to know where else is this person active, because you'll do the same to them, right? So if you have that same alias across multiple forums and they'll be monitoring your activity there, and you can show consistent reputation growth over time across multiple forums, that persona gets rapidly more consistent and believable. So once you've kind of set up all of those accounts and you are starting to build reputation, you're always going to start small, right? You're going to be passively listening, passively listening, passively listening. Then starting to engage, starting to talk, always trying to mimic the language of the people around you. All of these sub-communities and sub-forums, they always have their lingo, right? They have their things that they say, their ways of talking to each other, their inside jokes. You want to be able to pick up on all of those, and it takes time. You're going to be going in on these forums every single day, seeing what people are talking about and being on the in. And then once you start to make those conversations and those connections, people are going to look at your history and be like, oh yeah, this person belongs here. So that is all part of the process as we slowly build this persona crafting and we slowly work up on this. The other thing is, whenever you are in these communities, they oftentimes have a hierarchy within themselves. They have admins, moderators on these forums that they talk about. They gossip, right? These are all human networks. They all have their dirt they pass around on each other. So the longer you're in there, you're going to learn more and more useful and interesting things that you will use when you approach these people. Part of this, of course, is going to be, as I've said, understanding the general ecosystem that you exist in when you're in this persona. Every forum, of course, you have your Russian-speaking forums, you'll have your Chinese-speaking forums, you'll have all of these different forums, and the geographic location where all of these threat actors are is important to keep in mind. Of course, you're going to want to mimic the habits like get online at the correct times, right? So they can see that you're not from, it won't be obvious where you're from if you're not from there. They're going to speak certain ways. You'll notice this. Americans will often say, I have a question about something, If you go overseas and they speak English, they'll say, I have a doubt about something. It's a linguistic term, but it's a dead giveaway for somebody who lives elsewhere. So you need to be able to mimic those little turns of phrase that won't give you away. So making sure that as you kind of understand the different cliques and the different hierarchies that exist in these forums, and you start to be thinking about who is my human source that I want to get into. I know for a fact that there are invite-only chat rooms on this forum, and I want into those, right? Who has access? And then you start to make friends, right? You start to make friends, you start to make transactions, right? A lot of times these people are going to expect you to contribute money into the ecosystem because that's how it works, and that's your buy-in, right? So as you start to build that trust, you start to connect with the right people. You can gain that access and placement. You can figure out who to talk to, and your persona slowly and slowly gets better as you have that better reputation. Is that you?
All right, next, we're going to talk about building trust. Once your persona is created and the initial community mapping is done, the next step is gaining trust. This section focuses on how to build credibility within the cybercrime communities, turning your persona from a lurker into a trusted member. We do this by observing the community behavior, such as who are your most active users, what topics are trending, what are the common do's or don'ts. Use this period to build context, avoid early mistakes, and plan your entry points. Now we'll talk about some strategies for building that trust. First, you want to start with low-risk interactions, such as asking technical questions, requesting advice, or commenting on the tool. You also would need to share harmless resources or minor tips to show value. Avoid trying to impress. Consistency is more credible than flash. Consider vouching for a trusted user or referencing a public or accepted tool that also aligns with community norms. Building credibility takes time. The acceptance takes time. And the amount of time it takes depends on the forum size, the activity level, and the trust threshold. Do not force acceleration. This will raise suspicion. It looked like you were trying too hard, and you may get kicked out. Some of the forums have a reputational system, such as trust scoring, transactional histories, and other types of milestones. Some common pitfalls and mistakes. Don't post too frequently. Don't post too confidently. Don't try to dominate discussions. Additionally, be careful with your language. Don't mismatch your language. Don't use incorrect terms. Don't use incorrect slang. Monitor your tone. Also, and we said this in the past, be consistent with your time zone. Be consistent with your technical claims, and be consistent with your posting behavior. You also want to avoid for asking too much. Now, let's talk about how do we measure success. Some of the methods of success may include you're getting direct replies from respected users. You're invited to private chat or side channels. You're being mentioned or tagged by other users. You're gaining early access to tools or data before it's released to the rest of the forum. You got to be flexible. You want to make adjustments based on the community feedback. You also want to learn from your mistakes. We consistently need to remember that gaining credibility is a deliberate and nuanced process. Trust is the gateway to the intelligence extractions. It can't be rushed. The persona's value increases once it's integrated. It increases dramatically. Allowing access to closed threads, private chats, and director engagement is very important. Now, how do we extract intelligence? Once a persona has gained credibility, the next phase is collecting actionable intelligence without compromising our cover. This section outlines the passive versus active intelligence gathering. Passive intelligence gathering is basically monitoring the threads, downloading attachments, and archiving discussions. And this is ideal during your early access to the forum that you're operating in. Direct engagement. Once you have established your persona, then we can directly interact with threat actors and gather specific information. Again, this requires trust. This takes time, and you must be careful about how we interact and extract the data from the threat actor. One of the interesting ways of doing this, actually one of my favorite, is just a subtle conversation starter. For instance, what is the usual threat vector you guys prefer for this? I'm curious, do you test your stuff on corporate networks before selling it? Also, use a shared curiosity, or you can even fake a collaboration to obtain additional information without direct questions. Present yourself as a peer, and not an investigator. And this helps extract intel without raising suspicion. Sometimes the threat actors may pass you data. Sometimes, for instance, if they passed us a Word or an Excel file, that file may have metadata that may be valuable to us. Also, discussions about tools, vulnerabilities, or targeting logic can also provide clues and details that can help us determine who or what the victim is. Also, we can ask for proof of access or samples and analyze them offline for attribution and technical indicators. All this involves building a relationship. Remembering details from previous conversations, that's helpful into building relationships. Referencing shared forum cultures or jokes, that builds familiarity, and that's helping in building relationships. We can also offer small favors, such as code reviews or sharing resources in exchange for information. Also, always, we want to verify our documents and any information that we receive from them. We want to save our logs, save screenshots, any artifacts that we receive. They must be saved in a structured and a secure format. We want to tag and timestamp our conversations in case we ever need to construct a timeline. We want to correlate our intel with OSINT so we can try to determine what the threat actors activity and validate their authenticity. We also want to try to find patterns and campaigns, tools, and known TTPs that the threat actors may be using. We need to continue to maintain cover during collection. Don't over ask. Don't break the forum rules. Don't even break them in private messaging. We want to avoid technical questions that our persona should not know how to ask. We want to keep our interactions brief and friendly, and always leave room for future engagement. Intelligence extraction is as much as about trust and timing as it is about questions. The most valuable data is often shared casually and not requested directly. Success depends on blending tradecraft, social engineering, and disciplined documentation. And now we want to discuss ethics and infiltration.
Ethics, right?
Yes.
This is always the funnest discussion in any intelligence operation. Usually when we talk about technical collection, we don't really think too much about ethics because oftentimes it can feel really disconnected, can it? When we're just on there with scrapers or automated tools, just gathering up en masse all of this information, we don't really think too much ethically about what it means that we're using it, why it came to us, and all that. However, the second you ignore ethics when it comes to human intelligence operations, you're going to be in trouble and you're going to have a bad time with it because it gets really serious. The thing to always remember with this is that these are human beings and you're a human being too. So the first thing you want to think about whenever you're going to begin any human intelligence operation, of course, is going to be the legal part, right? The law can be there not just because you're forced to follow it, because it also provides you with a base level guideline for understanding whether what you're about to do is right or not. You always want to think about the legal risk. Yeah, obviously, if you're part of an organization, you should be speaking with your legal counsel anyway in terms of all of your intelligence collection. But especially when it comes to human intelligence, it's so important. Your organizations should have their own guidelines with this as well, that you're going to be wanting to follow. What I would say after that is that once you know that you're going to do this, you've decided that the legal risk is worth it, that the legal issues are not going to be a problem for you. You want to ask yourself, is this going to be the easiest way to do it, or is there a way to do it that's going to be the least harmful? So once we've moved past that, then the next thing you're going to want to think about is the operation that I'm about to do. If you're going deep cover, is the operation I'm about to do really going to do harm to third parties, right? If you're getting involved in some of these communities, then they're going to expect you to contribute to the ecosystem, right? And the ecosystem is money. So they're going to ask you to put money into these forums. They're going to ask you to buy accesses, right? And anytime you're patronizing these people, you are keeping that industry going, right? To a certain degree. You are part of it. They're going to ask you for advice. They're going to ask you for references. All of these things are contributing to the continued health of some of these criminal networks. And you have to ask yourself, is that really worth it in terms of what you're going to get out of it? Something to think about. What I would say is you really want to avoid at any cost any actions that are going to directly injure innocents or innocent organizations, right? You're not going to be on there trying to teach somebody how to break into an innocent person's computer, how to dox somebody else. You're not going to be doing any of that stuff if you're doing it ethically, right? If you get asked to do it, then hopefully you can find a way to, push it off without breaking your persona. So that's obviously what you're going to be wanting to go for. The other thing you want to think about, and this comes back to you as a human, right? whenever you're talking to these people, you find out that they're actually sometimes really nice people. So I remember one time I was talking to a source, and somebody we bought a lot of accesses for different clients. And we got on, and he had been, sort of distant recently, and he had just been not sending us that many accesses. It was really strange, but we started talking to him, and we found out that his girlfriend had just proposed to him, and he was really excited about it, and so he was starting to tell us all about that. It's a moment, right, where you realize that these are people with lives, and it's a moment where you realize how much rapport you've built with them, but it's also a moment where you realize this is actually a criminal person, and I'm building a deep connection to that person and that deep rapport with them, and you have to recognize your own human connection to that and figure out what that means for you in terms of your own ethical boundaries and what you're willing to do. Coming back to that, if you are, if you're going in and you're maintaining this relationship over a very long period of time, that can get to be a really big issue for you later on if you have to break it off, if you end up having to turn them in to the law enforcement or something like that, and that can be a very, very hard, very difficult moment for you. So you want to make sure that you as a human being are managing your own emotional exposure in terms of the operation. Okay. All right, I'm being told I'm talking too long, so I'll try to move a little quicker. So going back to when you're let's talk about decision making really quick. Always make sure that you are talking with your fellow collectors and your fellow operators about what it is that you're doing, and make sure that you're checking each other for ethical issues, right? Always fall back on one another, and fall back on your legal guidance, and fall back on your organization's guidance as well. Okay. All right, documentation. This is everybody's second favorite topic after ethics, right? So documentation is super important when it comes to this. You always want to make sure that you are documenting every single interaction that you have with this person, and that you are keeping all of that information in a place where you can access it later, right? Not just because that makes for more effective intelligence collection, but it also makes for a paper trail in case you ever do run into legal issues, and it preserves that evidence, right, and that chain of custody. And good documentation is also an absolutely critical foundation for making it actionable, right? Because if it's not documented, it never happens. All right, Sean, I'll send it.
All right, final takeaways. Human tradecraft is greater than automation. A scraper can obtain information, but it will never obtain trust. Automation can collect data, it can build trust. The most valuable intelligence comes from a human presence, patience, and precision. Because in this work, tradecraft will always outmatch tooling. Thank you very much.